Alex never expected to find trouble in the suburbs. It was supposed to be the perfect place to raise their kids, far from the chaos of the city. The house was modest, nestled at the end of a tree-lined street, the kind of neighborhood where everyone waved as they passed. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. The morning air was fresh as Alex sat on the front porch, sipping coffee, surveying the house. They had moved in only a month ago, and while the neighbors had been friendly enough, Alex could feel something was off. It wasn't anything specific, just a creeping unease, like being watched. It wasn't paranoia, but it felt like something lurking just beyond the horizon of their quiet life. Then came the letter. The envelope was thin, unmarked, with a bold HOA logo stamped in the corner. Alex had heard rumors about the strictness of the Homeowners Association, that they never expected to become its next target. The letter inside was formal, clipped, devoid of any warmth. Dear resident, it has come to our attention that the front yard of your property is in direct violation of the HOA's guidelines. Immediate corrective action is required. Please rectify the situation within 7 days or face substantial fines. Alex blinked at the words, their mind racing. What violation? The yard was neatly kept, with a small flower bed Alex had planted just the week before. Nothing about it screamed problem. Confusion quickly turned to frustration. But what choice did they have? The HOA was notorious for its power over the neighborhood, its fingers in every small detail of daily life. Alex knew that ignoring it wasn't an option. As they stuffed the letter into their bag and headed out, their eyes wandered over to the house next door. Karen, of course, it was Karen, was standing at her window, peering through the blinds with that look, the one that made you feel like you were under a microscope. Was she watching? Alex shook it off, not wanting to jump to conclusions, but a gut feeling stirred. The unease was back, stronger this time. By the time Alex reached the mailbox, Karen was at the end of her driveway, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. It wasn't just an innocent wave she gave them. No, this was the cold, calculated look of someone who held the power of the neighborhood in her hands, and Karen knew how to use it. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a matter of some trivial yard issue. This was personal. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating, and Alex couldn't help but feel the weight of Karen's gaze like a heavy stone pressing against their chest. As Alex turned and walked back toward the house, they had a chilling thought. This wasn't the start of something small. It was the beginning of a war. But why? What did Karen want? What could she possibly have against a new neighbor, just trying to survive in this cookie-cutter world of perfectly manicured lawns and white picket fences? The questions buzzed in Alex's mind, but the answer was as elusive as the truth itself. Alex was about to find out just how deep Karen's control over the neighborhood went, and what lengths she would go to keep her grip on it. The trap had been set, and Alex was caught right in the middle of it. The question was, would they make it out alive, or would Karen destroy everything, just because she could? As Alex stepped into the house, the door clicking shut behind them, they couldn't shake the feeling that their life, as they knew it, was about to change forever. The next few days were uneventful, at least on the surface. Alex tried to focus on their job and keep their mind off the HOA drama. But every time they stepped outside, the weight of Karen's gaze lingered, like an unseen hand pressing down. The whole neighborhood felt like it was watching, waiting for Alex to slip up, to make a mistake that could be used against them. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, another letter arrived. The same pristine envelope with the bold HOA logo, and Alex's heart sank. This time, it wasn't a simple notice of violation. It was more threatening, more insistent, and Alex could feel the cold grip of the HOA tightening around their neck. Dear resident, this is your second notice. We have reviewed your property and found that the current state of your front yard is not in compliance with HOA standards. As you were previously warned, you are required to take immediate action. We urge you to take this matter seriously and rectify the situation within the next 48 hours to avoid further action, including legal proceedings and fines." Alex read the words over and over, their stomach churning with dread. Legal proceedings. Fines. It seemed like overkill for a few weeds in the flower bed and some untrimmed hedges. But the implication was clear. If they didn't comply, things would escalate. The thought of a legal battle made Alex's skin crawl. They couldn't afford that. But why was Karen so obsessed with their yard? Was this really about the aesthetics, or was there something deeper going on? The HOA's rules were often vague and subjective, but this felt like it had moved beyond a simple case of neatness. Alex felt as though they were being cornered, and the more they thought about it, the more they realized that Karen had orchestrated this whole thing. She didn't just want to impose petty rules. She wanted to break Alex down, force them to submit. The silence that followed the letter's arrival felt suffocating. Alex spent the next few days frantically tending to the yard, raking leaves, trimming the bushes, adding new plants, but nothing seemed good enough. The nagging voice in their head told them it wouldn't matter. Karen was watching, and nothing would ever be enough to satisfy her. Every time Alex worked in the yard, it felt like an act of defiance, and yet Karen's shadow loomed ever closer. Then, one evening, as Alex was pulling weeds near the fence, they saw Karen standing at the edge of the property line, arms crossed, watching intently. It wasn't the casual glance of a neighbor anymore. This was the stare of someone who was judging, calculating. Karen didn't even look away when Alex caught her eye. In that moment, Alex felt a chill run down their spine. It was as if Karen was waiting for them to make a mistake, to slip up just enough to pounce. The unease that had been building now had a name. Fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of what Karen could do with that power she wielded over the HOA. Fear of how far she was willing to go to bend the neighborhood to her will. The next morning, Alex found a third letter on their doorstep, this one handwritten. The shaky script was unmistakable. "I've been watching you. Do what you're told, and maybe you'll avoid the consequences. Don't test me." The blood drained from Alex's face. This wasn't just an HOA issue anymore. This was something personal. Karen was playing a game, and Alex was the pawn. The threat was clear: comply or suffer the consequences. But what if they didn't comply? What would Karen do then? The suspense reached its boiling point. Alex could no longer ignore the growing sense of dread. The realization that Karen wasn't just a neighbor, but an antagonist with the power to destroy everything Alex had worked so hard for. And she wasn't stopping until she had won. Alex needed a break. Between the mounting pressure from the HOA and Karen's increasingly ominous presence, it felt like every part of their life was under siege. The anxiety had reached a tipping point, and Alex couldn't focus at work. They decided to take a trip to the pharmacy to pick up their life-saving medication, hoping a quiet moment would offer some relief from the chaos. Little did they know, their day was about to spiral into something far worse. The pharmacy was a small corner store, the kind that smelled faintly of antiseptic and old paper. Alex's prescription was ready, and as they walked to the counter, they felt a small flicker of calm wash over them. Maybe this brief visit would help them regain some sense of normalcy. But just as Alex reached the counter, they saw her, Karen, standing in the aisle, her eyes locked onto Alex with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. It didn't take long for Karen to approach, her steps deliberate, each one like a drumbeat of impending doom. Alex froze, fingers tightening around the prescription bottle in their hand. There was nowhere to run, no way to avoid this confrontation. Karen's voice broke through the silence, sharp and accusatory. "You think you can just waltz in here, act like everything is fine." Karen's words were laced with venom, her face twisted in a sneer. Alex's pulse quickened, but they tried to remain calm, refusing to let Karen drag them into another one of her tirades. "Karen, please," Alex said, keeping their tone even. "This isn't the time or the place. But Karen wasn't listening. Her voice rose, drawing the attention of nearby customers who began to murmur. "You're a disgrace to this neighborhood," she spat, her eyes scanning the prescription bottle like it was something to be scrutinized. "Faking illness just to get sympathy. Everyone can see it. You're nothing but a troublemaker." Alex felt a flush of anger rise in their chest, but they kept it in check. "I'm not faking anything. This medication is vital. You don't know what you're talking about." But Karen was relentless. She stepped closer, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're just trying to get out of following the rules, aren't you? This neighborhood deserves better than you. You're breaking the law, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." The words cut deeper than Alex expected. The intense pressure from the HOA, Karen's incessant stalking, and now this public humiliation. It felt like everything was closing in on them. But it was what Karen did next that took the situation from bad to worse. Without warning, Karen reached out, snatching the prescription bottle from Alex's hands. Alex's heart skipped a beat as they tried to pull it back, but Karen was stronger than expected. In a sickening moment of chaos, Karen slammed the bottle onto the counter, shattering the glass, and sending the medication spilling across the floor in a cascade of white pills. Alex's stomach dropped. The medication was ruined, and with it, any hope of staying healthy. The chaos in the pharmacy escalated. Customers gasped, and some began filming with their phones, but Karen just stood there, a smug smile spreading across her face. "This is what happens when you don't follow the rules," Karen sneered, her voice now a triumphant hiss. "You think I'm the problem? Look at what you've done." Alex stood frozen, the reality of the situation setting in. This wasn't just a petty neighborhood dispute anymore. It was a personal attack. This was sabotage. The realization sent a wave of panic crashing over Alex. Their heart raced as they looked at the wreckage of their medication on the floor. The pharmacist, who had been quietly watching, finally stepped forward, his face pale with shock. "I'm calling the police," he said, his voice trembling. Alex could barely hear him over the ringing in their ears, but they understood. The police were the only option now. Karen's reckless actions had gone too far. Karen's eyes flashed with fury when she realized the pharmacist was serious. She turned to Alex, her smile twisted with malice. "You're going to regret this," she hissed, but Alex could barely process her threats. The adrenaline pumping through their veins made everything feel distant, like the world was moving in slow motion. As the pharmacist reached for the phone, Alex's mind raced. Was this the final straw? What would Karen do next? And more importantly, was this just the beginning of an even more dangerous game? The moment Karen shattered the medication bottle, time seemed to stretch into infinity. Alex stared at the scattered pills, their heart pounding as they frantically gathered them from the pharmacy floor. Panic surged through them. The medication was irreplaceable, a lifeline they couldn't afford to lose. They had been managing just fine until now, but without it, their world would unravel. The thought was too much to bear. Karen stood there, arms crossed, watching Alex scramble, her smug expression twisted in satisfaction, as if she had just won a game. The utter disregard for the consequences of her actions left Alex in a state of disbelief. How could someone be this cruel? Alex had barely begun to collect the pills when Karen's voice cut through the air, sharp and cold. "You're pathetic," Karen sneered. "You think I'm going to let you off the hook after all the trouble you've caused in the neighborhood? You're just like all the others, weak, desperate for attention." Alex's hands trembled as they scooped up the last of the scattered pills, stuffing them back into the broken bottle. The desperation in their chest was overwhelming. "You don't know what you're doing. These pills are life-saving, right?" Karen interrupted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, please, you're just trying to get out of the rules. You're the one making the scene here, not me." The coldness in Karen's eyes sent a shiver down Alex's spine. This wasn't a simple neighborhood dispute. It was something darker, something twisted. Alex's mind raced, But in the back of their head, one thought echoed louder than the rest. They had to act. The pharmacist, who had been standing frozen in shock, finally snapped into motion. He reached for the phone, his hands shaky but determined. "I'm calling the police," he said, his voice rising with urgency. The words seemed to jolt Alex into action. They didn't want to waste a second. The idea of waiting around while Karen wove her lies and twisted the situation was unbearable. They needed help, real help, and fast. They grabbed their phone from their pocket, dialing the number with trembling fingers. As the phone rang, every beat of Alex's heart felt like a drum in their ears. They needed to be heard. They needed someone who would take them seriously. When the line finally connected, the dispatcher's voice was a lifeline. 911. What's your emergency? I need the police at the Cornerstone Pharmacy. A woman has destroyed my medication, and she's threatening me, Alex said, trying to keep their voice steady. The weight of the situation pressed down on them, but they couldn't break. Not now. Stay calm. Officers are on their way. Please keep a safe distance from the suspect, the dispatcher replied. But even as Alex listened to the calming words, they could feel the tension rising again, building to an unbearable crescendo. Karen was still standing there, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with malice, and her mouth twisted into that smug, knowing smile. Alex hung up the phone, their fingers cold and stiff. The seconds felt like hours. Every breath felt like it might be their last. It wasn't just the medication anymore. It was the violation. The violation of their safety, of their sense of control. Karen had crossed a line, and Alex wasn't about to let her get away with it. But how much power did she have left? What would happen when the police arrived? The pharmacist stepped back, clearly uncomfortable with the growing tension, but Karen didn't back down. "You're making a huge mistake," Karen said, her voice a low, threatening hiss. "You think the cops are going to save you. You're just a pawn in a game that's bigger than you'll ever understand. I'll make sure this goes down the way I want." Alex swallowed hard, but they stood their ground. The sudden realization hit them like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about one incident. This was part of something bigger. Karen had orchestrated this. She had been waiting for an opportunity to tear them apart, to break them down piece by piece. Alex wasn't just fighting for their medication anymore. They were fighting for their life. The sirens wailed in the distance, drawing nearer, and with them, the first real sense of hope. But as they turned to face Karen, the air between them thick with anger and fear, Alex knew this wasn't going to end easily. The battle for their life, their home, and their dignity was just beginning. But one thing was clear. Karen's reign of terror was about to come to an explosive end. The sound of sirens grew louder as Alex's pulse quickened. It wasn't just the relief that the police were coming. It was the sense that something was about to break, something that had been building for days. The storm had been gathering, and now it was crashing down on them. Alex couldn't tear their eyes away from Karen, who was still standing there, smug and self-assured. The look in her eyes was enough to send chills down their spine. She wasn't afraid. In fact, she seemed almost eager, as if she had been preparing for this moment her whole life. Karen's grip on the situation felt suffocating, and the thought of what might happen when the police arrived was too much to bear. What if they didn't believe Alex? What if Karen had already twisted the story in her favor? The doors to the pharmacy flew open with a bang, and two uniformed officers entered, scanning the scene with professional detachment. But as soon as their eyes landed on Karen and Alex, the tension in the air shifted. The officers were clearly expecting a routine dispute, nothing more. But Alex knew this wasn't just a dispute. This was a battle for their life. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, his voice calm but firm as he addressed Karen. "We received a call about a disturbance. What's going on here?" Karen's smile widened. She straightened up, as if preparing to present her case with all the righteousness of a martyr. "Officer, I'm glad you're here. This person," she motioned to Alex, has been causing trouble in the neighborhood for weeks. They've broken HOA rules, been disruptive, and now they're here trying to cause a scene. Karen turned to Alex, her eyes narrowing. They've been faking illness to avoid responsibility. And now they're accusing me of destroying their medication. Alex's heart hammered in their chest as Karen's lies spilled out, each word a knife aimed straight at their reputation. Alex tried to interject, but the officers didn't seem to notice. They were focused on Karen, hanging on her every word. Was this how it was going to go? Were they going to believe her over them? The first officer turned to Alex, raising an eyebrow. "Is that true?" he asked, his tone not unkind, but skeptical. Alex felt their throat tighten, their voice catching in their chest. They could feel Karen's eyes boring into them, waiting for them to slip, to falter. But Alex wasn't going to give up. They couldn't. "No," Alex said, forcing their voice to remain steady. "She destroyed my medication, on purpose. I need it to live. I've been fighting to keep up with the HOA's ridiculous rules. And now—" Alex swallowed, struggling to keep the desperation from their voice. "Now, I have nothing. The pills are ruined. I can't go without them." The officers exchanged a glance, but the skepticism in their eyes hadn't faded. The air felt thick with uncertainty. Alex had to prove this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was something far worse. "Karen," the second officer said, turning to face her, "did you destroy this person's medication?" Karen's eyes flashed with a mixture of defiance and annoyance. "Of course I didn't. That's a complete lie. They're just trying to manipulate you, officer." She took a step forward, her voice rising in a show of false indignation. "They're the ones causing problems around here. I'm just trying to make sure the neighborhood stays clean. If they can't follow the rules, that's their problem." The officers seemed to hesitate. The longer they stood there, the more the situation seemed to spiral out of control. Alex's anxiety spiked. If they didn't take control now, Karen would win, and everything would unravel. But then a thought struck them. If they could show the officers the surveillance footage from inside the pharmacy, they would have undeniable proof. "I'm not lying," Alex said, their voice stronger now. "There's a camera in here. You can check the footage. It shows exactly what happened. Karen destroyed my medication. She—" Before Alex could finish, Karen's face contorted with fury. "You're going to regret this," she hissed, her hands clenched into fists. "You can't just turn everyone against me. I'll make sure you lose everything." The officers exchanged another look, and finally one of them turned to the pharmacist. "Can we see the security footage?" The pharmacist nodded, his face pale but resolute. He led them toward the back of the store, where the security system was housed. The tension in the air was almost unbearable as everyone waited. Alex's heart raced in their chest. This could be the turning point. If the footage showed what they knew it would, Karen's destruction of the medication, it would be over. But if it didn't, Alex would be left with nothing but the wreckage of their life. The wait seemed endless. Finally, the officer returned, the expression on his face unreadable. He didn't speak immediately, and the silence stretched out, making Alex's stomach knot in anticipation. "Well?" Alex asked, their voice tight with anxiety. The officer stepped forward, his eyes meeting Alex. "We've seen the footage. Karen, I'm afraid you're going to need to come with us." Karen's face turned a shade of crimson Alex had never seen before. The smugness was gone, replaced by pure rage. She opened her mouth to protest, but the officer cut her off. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for destruction of property and harassment. You have the right to remain silent." The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the pharmacy, and for a moment, Alex just stood there, stunned. Karen's face was an explosion of red as she struggled against the officers, but it was clear she was done. The smug, self-righteous persona she had been clinging to was cracking, her mask slipping away as the reality of her situation set in. She had underestimated Alex, and now she was paying the price. Alex's heart pounded in their chest, not from triumph, but from the wave of overwhelming relief that washed over them. Karen was finally being held accountable. The officers led her to the squad car, her protests growing fainter with each step. Alex watched, their breath shaky, as the door slammed shut, and the police vehicle sped off, carrying Karen away. But the victory felt hollow. It wasn't over. Karen's arrest might have been the end of one chapter, but Alex knew it was only the beginning of a much larger, much more complicated battle. The HOA, the neighborhood, the whispers behind closed doors. It all felt like a storm still brewing on the horizon. The pharmacist, who had witnessed everything, approached Alex, his face still pale but relieved. "You're lucky, you know that. That footage saved you." Alex nodded, their throat tight. "I never thought it would come to this. I just wanted to be left alone." "You've got a hell of a neighbor," the pharmacist muttered under his breath, shaking his head. Alex couldn't argue with that. Karen had been a terror for months, her presence a dark cloud over their life. But now, Alex was starting to feel something else, something dangerous. Anger. There had been so many small slights, so many violations of their space, their dignity, that the weight of it all had finally built to a breaking point. Karen wasn't just a problem anymore. She was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong in Alex's life, and seeing her carted away in handcuffs didn't feel like enough. As the adrenaline slowly ebbed away, Alex could feel the strain in their body, the exhaustion from the past week catching up with them. The pharmacist's words barely registered. They walked out of the store, still clutching the remains of their broken medication bottle. It had been a Pyrrhic victory. Yes, Karen was arrested, but Alex's health was still at risk, and the HOA. Alex wasn't sure if they could ever truly escape its grip. That night, Alex lay awake, their mind racing. What would the HOA do next? How would the neighborhood react to Karen's arrest? There were always rumors, whispers behind closed doors, and Alex knew that Karen's arrest wouldn't silence the voices. If anything, it might make them louder. As the moonlight streamed through the window, Alex's thoughts shifted back to the medication, how desperately they needed it. The next day would be another challenge, another fight to find a way to stay healthy without falling further into Karen's web. The thought was overwhelming. And yet there was one thing Alex knew for certain. Karen had underestimated them. Alex had fought back. They weren't done, not by a long shot. But just as Alex began to drift off to sleep, a notification pinged on their phone. It was from a neighbor. The message was simple, chilling, and left Alex's blood running cold. "I heard what happened today. Don't think Karen's arrest is going to solve anything. The HOA isn't done with you yet." Alex froze. A knot of dread formed in their stomach. The real fight was just beginning. The next morning, Alex awoke with a sense of dread that clung to them like a second skin. The events of the previous day felt surreal, almost like a bad dream. Karen had been arrested, but her voice, the venomous undertone of every word she had spoken, echoed in Alex's mind. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And that message from the neighbor lingered in their thoughts like a ticking time bomb. As Alex shuffled through their morning routine, the weight of the situation seemed to grow heavier with every passing minute. The HOA hadn't taken kindly to their defiance, and Karen's arrest would undoubtedly fuel their efforts to push Alex out of the neighborhood. Alex had always known the HOA was more than just a group of rules enforcers. It was a silent army, a force that worked behind closed doors to maintain control. And now, Alex had unknowingly become their target. The day passed in a blur. Alex's mind too occupied with the fallout to focus on anything else. Their phone buzzed every so often, but each time, it was just another message from a neighbor, some cryptic comment or passive-aggressive remark. It was like the entire neighborhood had suddenly turned into a hive of whispers, each message designed to remind Alex that they were no longer welcome. But the real nightmare began when Alex arrived home. As they pulled into the driveway, they noticed something was off. The front yard, which had been well kept, maybe even a little too perfect for their liking, was now a chaotic mess. The grass was trampled, the flower beds uprooted, and there, in the middle of it all, was a large, garish sign stuck into the ground. HOA compliance violation. Alex's heart skipped a beat. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. The sign was meant to be a warning, an accusation that Alex had broken the HOA's sacred rules. But this wasn't just a sign. This was a declaration of war. They stepped out of their car, eyes scanning the yard, heart pounding. This wasn't just about one issue anymore. The HOA had declared an all-out campaign against them. The sign was only the beginning, and Alex knew it. The HOA had resources, connections, and a quiet, insidious power that could ruin everything. But this wasn't a battle Alex was going to lose. Taking a deep breath, Alex walked up to the front door. But before they could reach it, a car pulled into the driveway next door. It was Mr. Harris, one of the older neighbors who had always seemed to be one of the few who didn't buy into Karen's manipulative games. He had a reputation for being a bit of a loner, someone who preferred to mind his own business. But today, something in his eyes was different. He was watching them closely, his expression unreadable. "Hey, Alex," Mr. Harris called out, his voice low but urgent. "You might want to take a look at the HOA newsletter this month. They've added some new regulations." Alex's stomach sank. What kind of regulations? "Can't say too much," he said, glancing over his shoulder to make sure no one was listening. "But let's just say, they got a target on your back. And it's not just about the yard. Be careful. They're going to come at you from all sides." Alex felt a shiver run down their spine. They had known it would come to this, but hearing it from Mr. Harris, someone who had seen the HOA's power firsthand, made it all too real. The silent war had begun. As Mr. Harris walked back to his house, Alex's eyes lingered on the sign in their front yard. It felt like a symbol, a declaration of a battle they didn't even want to fight. But the more Alex thought about it, the more they realized there was no way out. They had already crossed a line. The HOA wouldn't stop until they had driven them out. The doorbell rang, interrupting their thoughts, and Alex's pulse raced. Who could it be? Opening the door, they were greeted by a figure in a well-tailored suit. Someone Alex had never seen before. The man extended his hand with a practiced smile. "I'm Mr. Davenport," he said smoothly. "I represent the HOA, and I believe we need to have a conversation." The air seemed to thicken as Mr. Davenport's smile stretched unnervingly wide. His perfectly pressed suit and polished demeanor made him seem like just another figure of authority, but Alex could feel the underlying menace in his words. He wasn't here for pleasantries. He wasn't here to settle anything. "I think we need to clear up some things, Alex," Mr. Davenport said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge. "The HOA takes its rules very seriously, and it's come to our attention that you've become a disruption. A troublemaker, really." Alex's stomach churned with anger, but they forced their face to remain neutral. The way Davenport spoke, so calm, so confident, was exactly the kind of tone Karen had used when she thought she was in control. But this time, Alex wasn't about to back down. "Is that so?" Alex's voice was steady, though their heart was pounding. "Because it seems to me like you've got a real problem with anyone who challenges your power." Davenport's eyes narrowed, but his smile never wavered. "It's not about power, Alex. It's about order. The community depends on structure, on compliance. People like you, people who think they can just ignore the rules, don't understand that. You've become an inconvenience." The word inconvenience hit Alex like a slap to the face. They weren't just being targeted. They were being erased, reduced to nothing more than a problem to be eliminated. Every word Davenport spoke was a silent attack, a calculated attempt to push Alex further into a corner. "So, what now?" Alex shot back, crossing their arms. "You're going to send me another warning?" Another sign in my yard. Maybe you'll just raise the stakes and come after me legally." Mr. Davenport's gaze flickered for a brief moment, just a split second, but it was enough. There was something behind his composed exterior that Alex hadn't noticed before, something darker, more desperate, but it was quickly masked by his perfect poise. "We don't take kindly to defiance, Alex," he said, voice low. "And if you continue to challenge us, well, let's just say your options will become quite limited." Alex's mind raced. This wasn't just a man talking about HOA rules. This was a man talking about something much more dangerous. There was a threat hidden beneath the smooth exterior of his words, and it was one Alex couldn't ignore. Just as Davenport took a step forward, Alex's phone buzzed in their pocket. The sudden interruption cut through the tension like a knife. Without thinking, Alex pulled it out and glanced at the message on the screen. It was from Mr. Harris. "They're playing dirty, Alex. I know someone who can help. Meet me at the park, 10 p.m. Don't tell anyone." The message sent a cold shiver down Alex's spine. Who was this person? And what could they possibly do? But there was no time to second-guess. Mr. Davenport was watching, his sharp eyes catching every shift in Alex's demeanor. Alex needed to keep control, needed to hold their ground. Without breaking eye contact, Alex slid the phone back into their pocket. "You're right about one thing," they said slowly, each word deliberate. "This is about order. But not the order you want. It's about the order I'm going to create." Davenport's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. The silence that stretched between them was almost unbearable, thick with the tension of an inevitable showdown. With a final, chilling smile, Davenport turned and walked toward the gate. "We'll see how long you can keep this up, Alex," he called over his shoulder. "The HOA doesn't forget." As he disappeared down the street, Alex stood frozen, their body trembling with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. Davenport's words hung in the air like a dark promise. The war was far from over, but Alex was no longer a passive player. They had found their resolve. They had one chance, one meeting with Mr. Harris, one shot at understanding who had the power to help them fight back. As night fell and the shadows grew longer, Alex stood by their front door, heart racing, every fiber of their being pulling them toward the park. Tonight, everything would change. And when they faced Davenport again, they would be ready.